two massive entities, two massive holders of Bitcoin are coming under attack from the IMF. The first obviously being El Salvador. Everybody is talking about the fact that the IMF has been attacking El Salvador, but then there's a little bit of a twist to this story because we've seen rumors that Tether, who of course is one of the largest holders of US treasuries in the entire world, might also have to sell some Bitcoin to comply with US stablecoin rules. This is what JP Morgan, one of the biggest banks in the world, is saying right now. So I wanted to quickly discuss what is going on at the IMF. How much influence do they have? Why is Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan, one of the biggest banks in America, saying that Tether might have to sell Bitcoin to become a regulated stablecoin for America? There's a lot to this story, and this is a little bit of a long rabbit hole, so make sure you stay to the end of this one. But Rob, let's start with the El Salvador news. I would love your take on everything happening in, do we say what used to be Bitcoin country, or is it still Bitcoin country today?
Yeah, great question. So yes, I think we should zoom out a little bit and just go through the last 4 years or so of Bitcoin development in El Salvador. Bukele took over in 2019, and his first 2 years were used to clean up the country, right? It was the murder capital of the Western Hemisphere, and he was able to arrest all the gangs and make it into the first or second most safe country in the Americas. An unbelievable achievement. Few would ever be able to accomplish such a thing. And then riding off of that success of coming down on the gangs, he established Bitcoin as legal tender in September of 2021. And this was a ground shaking development. It was thought that, yes, El Salvador derives about a quarter of its GDP from remittances. So having Bitcoin as legal tender would make it very easy for people from abroad, especially America, to send money back to the country in the form of Bitcoin. And it would set this country off on a new monetary standard, as they themselves do not have their own printing press. They do not have their own fiat currency. They are a completely dollarized country, and they introduced Bitcoin to coincide with the dollar in their economy. So the rollout of the Bitcoin in El Salvador was, some would say, questionable, right? They had set up the Chivo wallet, these ATMs around the country, and they airdropped everybody $30 worth of Bitcoin. But when you're dealing with a free money, of course, there's going to be lots of scams and identity theft in order to try to get this free $30. And it was sort of rife with problems. And so while the top-down approach of giving everybody Bitcoin didn't really work out too well, the introduction of the Bitcoin law in El Salvador allowed for things such as Bitcoin education to flourish. There's this grassroots operation, Me Premier Bitcoin, My First Bitcoin. They have set up the world standard when it comes to Bitcoin education curriculum. They are flourishing in El Salvador. The government is sponsoring Bitcoin education in this form of Cubo Plus, where they take the most talented developers and give them world-class Bitcoin education, introducing them to the top Bitcoin developers, flying them around the world to Switzerland, Lugano, to different conferences and whatnot, and creating this technological base, this new generation of talent that will lead Bitcoin forward in the country. So while the government initiative was sort of running into some snags, from down below, things were really awesome. And of course, there's circular economies, Bitcoin Beach, Berlin, El Salvador, these places where people are using Bitcoin on a daily basis for everyday usage. It's really amazing stuff, and I highly recommend you go and experience it yourself. However, there is a problem here. And so when the Bitcoin law was first announced, the IMF made it very clear that they did not like this. This was a problem, and they pretty much made El Salvador a financial pariah. And over the last 4 years, El Salvador has tried to be a good boy in the monetary system by paying down their debt and trying to make sure that they are up to snuff when it comes to all these regulations and everything. However, the debt situation is getting out of hand. When Bukele took over in 2019, they had $21 billion worth of debt. And as it stands today, they have over $32 billion worth of debt. That is a 52% increase, nearly matching the rate of debt increase that America had over that same period, right? So America's debt is going parabolic. El Salvador's debt is going essentially parabolic. However, the real problem for El Salvador is that they don't have a printing press. Again, they are tied to the dollar. So they can't print money to try to alleviate that debt burden. So that left them in a really hard situation because their GDP is not growing that fast. For the last 5 years, they've averaged a GDP of 2.8% growth, which is actually lagging a lot of their neighbors in Central America. And for a small country, a developing country, that's just not fast enough. In order to bring prosperity to the people, for a small country like that, you need to be growing at 5, 6, 7% a year in terms of GDP to really lift up all the boats. So where does that bring us? That brings us to the end of 2024, where El Salvador actually had to bend the knee to the IMF and ask for a loan. The IMF agreed to give them a $1.4 billion loan, along with $2.5 billion or so of additional funding from their other partners. But this loan came with strings attached. And those strings included a lot of cutbacks on their Bitcoin program. They could no longer recognize Bitcoin as legal tender. They could not accept Bitcoin for taxes. They had to stop all state-sanctioned mining, as well as stopping accumulating Bitcoin. So this is where the further controversy arises, right? Bukele has come out and said that he is going to be defiant, that they will not stop purchasing Bitcoin. And they have, over the last week, shown that they are adding 1 Bitcoin a day to their Bitcoin reserves. But what we see here is sort of a contradiction straight up to what the IMF has said is the rules of this loan. So yeah, who's right here, right? Is El Salvador definitely took this deal. They signed on board for this, but are they defying the IMF to their face? It's interesting, and also on the chart here with the Bitcoin purchases, you could see that they took a break for a week of buying Bitcoin, but then purchased a week's worth in one day. So lots of questions. There's more questions than answers at this point. And Bukele has been defiant, yes, but he has not been clear. So I don't think we really know exactly what's going on here, but there is definitely tension between Bukele, El Salvador, Bitcoiners, the IMF, and the future of Bitcoin country.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of these watch this space stories. It's still very unclear what's going on right now. That was a great breakdown of everything, Rob. That was incredible. You pretty much nailed everything that's been happening in El Salvador over the past few years. But I think, again, this chart here continues to confuse many of us. I was asking many questions when we saw this big flat line here for about a week. We saw no buying from El Salvador, and some people were saying, hey, what's going on? Has the IMF won this battle? But no, they're still buying Bitcoin. Again, it's really important to recognize just how well this Bitcoin strategy has worked in El Salvador. Right now, the treasury for their country is sitting on $130 million of profit. It's up by 86%. Right now, they're still squatting on more than $500 million worth of Bitcoins. That's why I think a lot of people are paying very close attention to what is going on with the IMF, particularly because of this tweet right here. I think this opens up a very interesting rabbit hole. Nico from Simply Bitcoin says 94 countries have loans with the IMF. All those countries were just sent a message that they can't buy Bitcoin. This is why after 2021, no other countries followed El Salvador. Okay, it's the IMF's attacks that could be a reason or an explanation for why we only have one official Bitcoin country today. Again, we do have lots of nations that are accumulating Bitcoin in their sovereign wealth funds. Sovereign wealth funds are even printing fiat to buy shares of MicroStrategy in the case of Norway. But maybe countries are a little bit too scared to make Bitcoin legal tender, make it a currency that can be used in a country, because they're scared to go to battle with the IMF.
Completely. The IMF, I mean, Alex Gladstein put out a book about the IMF and how they are pretty much a form of financial colonialism, right? They go to countries when they're desperate and say, yeah, we'll give you cash that we print out of thin air in exchange for large portions of your economy, right? Or we'll direct your economy to create a very specific export that your people don't really want or use, but the rest of the developed world wants. And so that leaves you dependent on making just shrimp, right? I think they did that to Burma. They made Burma's economy highly reliant on shrimp exports, while the rest of the world ate their shrimp. These people were given pennies in exchange, right? So the IMF really has been quite the parasite, and it's sort of allowed for this developed versus developing world situation to develop even further, and the bifurcation of the two and a greater divide, as we've seen today. But going back to the El Salvador point, there was just a press conference yesterday, and yeah, they were asked about El Salvador and what is going on. The person asked, they keep buying. Isn't this in disagreement with the contract that you guys signed? And the IMF said, regarding the recent increase in Bitcoin holding by the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Fund, the authorities have confirmed that these are consistent with the agreed program conditionality. And we do remain engaged with the authorities on this important issue. So it seems as if the IMF does know that this number is going up on their SBR. There are some questions, like maybe the Bitcoin is coming from another fund and they're just switching from one wallet to another to make it look like they're buying 1 Bitcoin a day. I mean, that could be possible. I also got a scoop from a independent reporter down in El Salvador that the FIDE Bitcoin Trust, which was established to fund the Chivo wallet program and provide there being no transaction fees, and that first initial airdrop of Bitcoin, that was funded with hundreds of millions of dollars, and now that's bankrupt. So maybe that has got some Bitcoin that's transferring over. So there's a lot of questions here. I mean, I like El Salvador. I've been to El Salvador. I think what Bukele has done there has been absolutely amazing. But he's definitely a showman. He's definitely a PR guy, and he's definitely gained a lot of international recognition for his Bitcoin stance. So it would be a real big gut punch if he had to step that down from his own personal standing. But I mean, I think what everybody wants really is what's best for the El Salvadorian people, right? And if the country was really in such a drastic position that they might have defaulted if they didn't get this loan, then, I mean, I guess it's understandable. They had to do what they had to do. But what's really going on there is, well, I think the good things moving forward are that 6,100 plus Bitcoin that they own in their strategic Bitcoin reserve will not have to be sold. I think that's clear as part of the deal with the IMF, that they do not have to sell that. And two is that these educational initiatives and these circular economies, they're not stopping either, right? And I think that is really going to create the next generation of leaders and Bitcoiners in El Salvador that will continue the Bitcoin mission forward, even if the current administration needs to take a step back.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. We are seeing a lot of grassroots initiatives in Bitcoin in El Salvador. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. You know, Bitcoin is all about empowering the little guy and freeing people from the loan shark, who is the IMF, as Johnny Lee Young very correctly highlights in the live chat. That's who the IMF is. They're a loan shark. Why are they attacking a country where 70% of the population is unbanked? Okay, Bitcoin is banking literally the poorest people around the world. And the IMF is a loan shark swooping in here, literally attacking these people. Okay, this is why we always say Bitcoin is for the little guy. This is why we love Bitcoin. This is why we encourage people to use the tools and investigate how you can get your hands on Bitcoin. There are lots of ways that the little guy can actually get their hands on Bitcoin. Some of the more interesting ways that I've found on my travels by living as a nomad for the past 3 years is actually these really cool little Azteco Bitcoin vouchers. Again, I have issues. I don't have bank accounts. Okay, I have a little bit of issues trying to buy Bitcoin through your traditional exchanges. Okay, and this is why I really like what Azteco has built. They are these really cool little Bitcoin vouchers that you can buy in as many as 190 countries all around the world. And you can literally get started by buying these vouchers with as little as $10. Okay, so what are these vouchers? They're a little bit like a prepaid gift card, except it's for Bitcoin. So you can buy these vouchers anywhere around the world. You can get started with $10. And I think it's really interesting that a lot of people from all around the world are slowly but surely beginning to realize that there are alternative ways to get your hands on Bitcoin. We think Azteco is one of these alternative ways that you can get your hands on Bitcoin. You don't need an account. You don't need to verify your location or do any of these crazy things that you do have to do in other places. So highly recommend you check out Azteco. There is a link for their services down below in the description as well, where you can get started buying Bitcoin in 190 different countries with Azteco and start actually using Bitcoin the way it's supposed to be used. Bitcoin is for everyone. Bitcoin isn't and shouldn't be turned into this kind of walled garden ETF asset that I think a lot of TradFi actors think Bitcoin is. Obviously, I'm referring to the ETFs there, Rob. But again, Bitcoin is freedom. Take advantage of it. And as we can see, All Night Hider in the chat has even slapped a link to Azteco in the live chat for you guys. So check that out. There it is, Azteco. Highly recommend you guys have a look at it.
Yeah, really cool product there, Azteco. Again, don't need to sign up. Can just go straight online, purchase $10, $100 worth of Bitcoin, and purchase the gift card and send that Bitcoin anywhere to any wallet around the world. So very cool product.
Very cool product. Very cool product. Now I want to take a look at the live chat because it is absolutely blowing up right now. Okay, there is, if my numbers are correct, there's 6,318 of you guys on the live stream. So welcome to everyone tuning in on a Friday afternoon. Again, the weekend is coming and you guys are not out drinking and partying. You listen to the Bitcoin news. So thanks for tuning in. We have a lot of you guys in the chat. I'm being very careful about what I read on a live stream and which comments I don't bring up. I don't want to get ourselves in hot water here, Rob.